Hello and welcome to another episode of Anomalies. I would be one of your hosts on a somewhat reoccurring basis, Dan Hall, and with me tonight is my other longtime co-host, Dave Jinks. And Dave and I have been doing this show for 13 years. Is that an unlucky number, Dave? I don't know.
Wow.
I think that's a lucky number. I think this is maybe Anomalies number 85 or 6. We'll know after we do the editing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of been, per year we do a, not that many on average, but we've really ramped it up because we've had a lot of really interesting guests, and today is no exception with Sherry. So why don't you go ahead and do, Dan, you know Sherry personally, and you go ahead and do the intro for her.
Okay. Sherry Mulholland is someone I have known for, I don't know, probably since the middle 2000s. And one of the things I would say about Sherry is she's one of the more interesting people that I've run across in my life. And she's the person who really kind of got me into ghost hunting. So I thought we might have a conversation tonight, among other things, about how all that transpired in an organization that Sherry founded called BOO, the Bellingham Observers of the Odd and Obscure. So, Sherry, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm
Yeah,
really
well,
glad that we got able to get on the air and do this.
yeah, there were some doubts about that for a while. So I met Sherry when we were living in Bellingham, Washington, and Sherry doesn't live in Bellingham, Washington. She's a Floridian now, so a little change of venue for her.
Yeah.
So, Sherry, let's talk about BOO. So, first of all, what did BOO stand for?
It stood for Bellingham Observers of the Odd and Obscure. So
And
it just shortened down to BOO.
yeah, where'd you come up with
And
that?
people said they really liked it. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I did.
I didn't come up with that. A woman who's the member of our group in the early stages of its development, she brought it up to a meeting and they voted on it. And I was wanting a different name. I was wanting a silly name called Was Up, like Washington amateurs, just blah, 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 da, da, And but the little, I thought I'd have like a little Bigfoot going like, yeah, Was Up, And that's kind of picturing him kind of leaning on the ladder somewhere of Was Up and kind of like with a little zoot suit on, and all this stuff. I thought, oh, that'd be really cute. But they didn't think it was. So Boo stuck, and there it is.
Well, that's unfortunate because you were the founder of it. So you should have been able to call it whatever
Well,
you wanted.
it grew on me. It grew
Oh,
on me.
okay.
Yeah.
So why
I
did
think the fact that they voted it down, my suggestion down, was just kind of hurt my ego a little bit at the time.
okay. So why did you want to start an organization like that?
Well, I've always grown up with adventures in the paranormal through my family, who were more or less spiritualists, if you want to say, try to describe them in any way when it comes to the paranormal. And so I grew up with ghost stories and experienced a lot in my childhood. And my family members did. My mother was very psychic. We used to have seances at the house when we'd have family reunions. We'd have seances,
Cool.
and so that's the kind of family I grew up in. So after I moved to California away from the family, excuse me, I searched out like-minded people, and I had a hard time finding anybody like that there. I just had one or two people that were really into the spiritual realm, about spirit guides and that sort of thing. So when I moved to Washington State, I got involved in a spiritualist church up in Bellingham, and it was there that I met a lot of other psychics, some of them that were really well developed in their abilities, and I found some mentors there, and they kind of I kind of like talked about ghosts a lot with them. And they were, most of them were into rescuing spirits, sort of like the Ghost Whisperers series. And I was more like it wanting to just see the ghost or commune with the ghost or experience the ghost. And I didn't really know what to call it. I mean, like a haunting. I didn't know about intelligent hauntings versus residual hauntings. I didn't know any of the lingo or what to call any of that stuff. But my church, we invite people in, speakers to come in, and we invited Ross Allison in from Seattle, from A Ghost, to come up and speak at our church. And it was at that time that he came in and he brought his equipment that he had. And this was like in 2000, 2001, maybe 2001. And then we got to kind of see about the meters, the recorders, and what they were doing, how he was brought it into a scientific level to where they were actually looking for evidence that you could measure, measurable evidence. And whereas the church, everybody in the audience were psychics. And so we're all just kind of sitting around looking at each other like, holy hell, didn't even know people could do this. We all knew about Hans Holzer, but we knew about Lloyd Arbuck, but we didn't know about the lay persons such as ourselves could do this. And so that's why we invited him up, and I was really glad he agreed to. And so after he left, we all, it was a small group of us, I should say, but we all talked about it, but it was a small group of us that got together and decided, we're going to try this. So I went out and bought a camera, a video camera. Somebody else went and got a digital camera. And we started looking for digital recorders. And that's how it got going. Now, we had a lot of problems in the beginning because we didn't agree on a lot of things. Because they still wanted to do the rescue work, whereas I was wanting to do the scientific fact-finding stuff. And I'm a psychic. I mean, I believe my abilities helped me to connect and know about where to go and to bring in information for us to study. But I wanted to be able to record things. I didn't necessarily want to be the person that would rescue him. So I made a pact then that I was going to look for investigators that would have a more scientific approach to it. And I could refer out to these mediums that wanted to do the rescue work, but I wouldn't have that during my investigation per se. So there's a few times we did, but we didn't necessarily do that.
So let's define some terms here and then maybe bring Dave into this conversation. So you've used a couple of terms here, psychic and medium. What's the difference between those two things?
Well, a psychic can do a lot of various things. They can be like get impressions from touching things. They can pick up people's thoughts or like empaths and that sort of thing, people's feelings and so on. I receive messages maybe at night in their dreams and that sort of. A medium is somebody more like what Sylvia Brown was or what John Edwards is now, where they actually make contact with the spirit and get message, can usually see the spirit, and they get messages where they can tell people about it. And that's what some of the mentoring in the church that I joined, they taught me how to do that. And then there was a woman who was a very good channeler, and she took me under her wing. She was one of the ministers, and she helped me develop the channeling. And I started doing that. And channeling is where the spirit actually comes into our body, and I can see them. It's like I have a picture of who they are. I have their essence in me. I'm completely in control. I can let them go out of my body anytime. I'm awake. I'm very aware of what's being said. I know what they're thinking. It's like our brains are joined, and they know what I'm thinking. And I've had spirit like jump out of me really quick because they knew what I was thinking and they didn't like it. Like if I thought they were silly, they didn't like that, but they jump out. And at the time they jump out, I would know that they were upset because I thought they were silly. That's what I'm talking about. They know what I'm thinking too.
So,
Does that explain that?
yeah, but I want you to make a distinction here. So the difference between channeling and possession, because they
Oh,
sound kind of similar. How would you
they do,
say,
don't they?
how would you say they're
Well,
different?
I'm not an authority on possession. And that's a whole different realm. But for the layperson listening to this, they'd say, "Well, it is very similar. Why wouldn't you know the difference?" But I'm not a Catholic priest for one thing. I don't never gone out looking for people who were possessed, so I wouldn't in around that arena. So I did have one instance. I'll talk to you about this. There was investigation we went into in an old abandoned hotel, and it was owned and all, but it hadn't been used in probably 50 years, and it was being sold, and there was no furniture or anything like that in it. It was just the vacant rooms. The glass wasn't broken, but it's wintertime. It was just before Halloween, and we were up on the second and third story of this hotel, this old hotel downtown Bellingham, and we had equipment on, and I had my team make a circle, which we did a lot of the time on our investigation, so that we could kind of ground ourselves, um, and to where we can kind of draw in the spirits closer into us, so that we might get EVPs, or we might be able to film something, or the psychics could get impressions. That day, I wasn't, that particular investigation, I wasn't an acting psychic there, or the medium, or the channeler, whatever you want to call it. I had another person there was going to do the channeling, and she was very experienced and had worked with our group for about a year. And so we made this circle, and this building right next to this hotel, there was a mortuary, a pioneer mortuary. The building was long gone, but the mortuary was right there next to where this motel was, and now it's just an empty lot. So we're up there, and this place is just, you can see with your naked eyes, you can see spirits walking around in the hallways with your naked eye. And it would be just partial apparitions, just partially of their bodies. And you could see their energy, and it was just it was just a phenomenal experience. And just about everybody that was there, and we might have been like a group of 8 of us, had experiences. So you didn't have to be psychic to have paranormal experiences in here. And as we're circling up, and I'm starting to do this grounding meditation, I start hearing this click, 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 and it's this woman who's sitting across from me in this circle. She's a big Samoan gal, beautiful gal, and young, gorgeous, strong, powerful woman, kind of new to the group. She didn't consider herself a psychic. She didn't have that kind of repertoire in her life, and her nails just started clicking. It's almost like it made the sound like claws, just click, click, click. It was really loud. And I looked up, and I seen her with her head down. She had a hoodie on because it was chilly, and she just sitting there with her hands on her knees in her lap, just clicking, 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 just like she was angry. And you could see it was like you could feel the power and the energy building with each time she clicked her fingernails. And all of a sudden, their voice boomed out at me, said something like, something like, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" And
That wasn't her
I don't
voice.
remember seeing it. Huh?
That wasn't her
What?
voice. That wasn't her
No,
voice.
it was not her voice. This was a very deep, loud, husky voice. More of a big man, something big, like it came out of a big chest. And I'm not talking about a big woman's chest, but a big chest, powerful. And she started, this entity, whatever this was, started tearing me down. And earlier in the night, the group wanted to help a spirit move on, because there was a spirit that came through that voiced that it was in pain. It could hardly vocalize. through this settler. And so the group decided they wanted to help the spirit move on. So that's what they did. And I always supported that if that was the group's conscious. So this thing came through, this entity came through and told us that the spirits belonged to it. I don't even know if I call it a man. Belonged to him, belonged to it. It was their possession, its possession. And that now something I was setting up against the wall too. I had the street behind me, the windows facing the street behind me. And when this thing came through, honest to God, in my mind, a picture of, remember the Exodus at the end where the priest jumps out the window because the demon came into him?
Yeah, I do remember that.
That flashed through my mind, and I thought that thing could come over, or maybe in power could come across the room and just toss me right out a window. It was scary. That's the only time I've ever been scared out in the field. And it just tore me up once I'd done that. It called me all kinds of names. It pretty much told me that I was lower than snail dung. And it was just quite an experience. So I told the group, and everybody's quiet, because everybody's in shock. This thing possessed this woman, whatever it was. And so I told the group, turn around, don't look at it, and don't get your energy. Now, this thing's talking to me as I'm telling my group to do this. So there's quite a bit of like chaos feeling in the room. So everybody's turning their back to her, and she's just kind of going off and not wanting to give me a chance to say anything. And then slowly the energy gets lessened and lessened and lessened to where it's Malia, her name. She came back to us, and she was just her sweet self, but she was the most sweetest, endearing young lady, soft-spoken, smiling all the time, had a beautiful smile, and this was so out of character for her. So that's the only possession I have ever been a witness to, and I really don't want to be a witness to another one. That's not my area. I'll leave that up to the preachers and the priest, the Vatican, and whoever does that.
Leave that up to the exorcist. Dave, do you want to jump in here with any questions for Sherry about forming Boo and some of those things?
I've got kind of it's reminding me of a personal experience with my father passing away quite a number of years ago. And I felt at times, for certain reasons, which I won't go into here, but I felt that maybe he has been trapped in an in-between state, between our, what we call regular life and the afterlife. And I'm just wondering about Sherry's opinion or experiences with entities or humans that have passed on in the suspended state, or a intermediate state of life, of living, of death, whatever you want to call it, and how that might relate to ghosts. If you have any thoughts about how, anything there that you've experienced and concluded that that's what's happening, and what's your theory about that?
I really can't say that I know a lot about that either, because I wasn't a rescuer. I was in a group of people that did that work, and I was a witness, but I kind of took a back seat to that and just was a witness at the time. But that does happen a lot of the times. These, like I said, these mediums in the spiritualist church, that's what they really wanted to do with the spirits. And it was mainly those that I lived in a hospital building for 7 years, an old hospital building in Bellingham. It was a St. Joe Hospital. And I lived in that building for 7 years. So I ran across a lot of that. And I brought my team in, from the church, I should say. I brought the church in, members of the church that did that rescue work. I brought them in 3 times. And they did help a lot of spirits that were just kind of in limbo or just lingering around and didn't know where to go, and they felt like they were still suffering. It's almost like as if they were still in the pain and the suffering of their physical form before they died, and they didn't really realize they were dead. And I didn't personally have a lot to do with that, but I'm very aware of that. And just as like that series, The Ghost Whisperer, um, portrays, there's people out there doing that work. I mean, it's very good work, and there's a need for it, and I believe it's going strong.
I wonder if
Does
that,
that answer your question?
yeah, I know, and you kind of talked about that before with the group. There's certain people who are interested in different aspects of any phenomenon, and you are more interested in others. And I'm wondering, if in helping these spirits move on, I'm wondering if that's really what's happening, or if it's something that we, the living, still are detecting and feeling. It's not necessarily that the spirit is stuck and hasn't moved on, but maybe there's some remnant that's hanging around for whatever reason that we still detect. But I'm just, nobody knows the answer, or at least nobody's talking if they know the answer. But just
Right.
because you've been around so many different cases and people investigating these things, I just wonder what your feeling is as far as those, what we're saying, intermediate stages, if that's what's even happening, or if it's something that's just energy that's residing in a place, because Dan and I have talked to a lot of guests, I think, who have kind of really talked about the same issues, remnants of energy. Dan talked about going to Gettysburg, and you talked about a hospital. A lot of reports about hospitals still retaining these memories because there's a lot of pain there. There's a lot of emotion. Yeah. Is it because of the pain and the emotion, do you think, that some of these things get stuck in the matrix, so to speak?
I think that's a good way of put, because like you said, we really don't know. None of us do. It's why it's paranormal. And I think everybody has kind of their own idea. They can come up with theories, and it all comes out. I talked to Dan about this a lot of the times. The more I was into the paranormal realm, studying it and being a part of it and investigating and all that, looking for answers, it just caused me to have more questions.
Exactly. Yeah.
It just opened me up, really.
It's so true.
Yeah,
One
it's just
one
endless
thing
possibilities of what it's all about.
one thing you might want to make a distinction about, and just so people who listen to this know, Sherry and I and about four other people did a ghost hunting class in Olympia, Washington this last fall. And Sherry came on with us via Zoom to talk to the students in that class. And one of the distinctions we made was between residual and intelligent hauntings. So, Sherry, you might want to talk about that for a little bit.
Well, residual hauntings is sort of like the ghost trains that people talk about hearing, or uh, maybe somebody walking up the stairs quite often during most nights, up and down the stairs, or things that kind of happen because it's just like an echo of time, an echo of sound, or uh, it's like something that fills the room, and it's not intelligent. It's not going to interact with us. And I've had a lot of those experiences. The paranormal group had a lot of those experiences. Then the intelligent hauntings are the ones where the spirit is actually, it's like the spirit has, somebody died and the spirit moved into the realm and is still very conscious of us, is intelligent, able to communicate, and makes contact with us ever so briefly that it is, but we're able to have dialogue. And it might be through an EVP, electronic voice phenomena, or it could be through a medium, or it could be through, let's say, a spirit board, something like I'm trying a pendulum, something like that.
Okay. So let's go back to forming the group Boo. So initially, it sounded like the Boo group was a part of your spiritualist church. Some of the people who are
It
into that
was.
church. But now I joined Boo when I moved to Bellingham, and I joined because I read something in the newspaper that said if you're interested in joining a paranormal group, show up at this place at this time. So, talk a little bit about how you
Yeah.
got people to be in this group.
Yeah, starting up was it took time. I had already kind of separated myself from the church. The church closed down. I made it very clear from the beginning. I was the one who was getting the equipment. I was the one finding the places to investigate, that sort of thing. And I made it very clear that I wanted it to be separate from the church. It was its own club, if you want to call it that, its own group. It was not part of the church, but it sprang up out of the church. So those that were interested and wanted to do scientific investigations came and joined with me. And there was a little bit of troubles with that. Some people didn't like that. Some of the ministers wanted to have control over what we did. And I'm saying, no, I'm not going to do that. So I kind of like separated myself from the church. I went to the services and everything still, but I separated myself. And so I had to go to places like community festivals and stuff like that. And I'd put up a table. I'd rent my space, and just like vendors would. And I'd put up a table and put out flyers and have presentation boards and all this other stuff, introducing my group to the community. Now, back when I was doing this, I started doing this right after I met Ross Allison from Seattle. And so it was probably 2001 when I started doing this. And now me and the psychics were already doing the work finding spirit that they wanted to rescue. So we were already doing that. But do it in an investigative way started in 2001. And the community didn't know about us. They didn't even know there was anything like that. The series Ghost Hunter wasn't on TV yet. People kind of like didn't want to really talk about that kind of stuff. Kind of thought that we were weird, and so it took a long time. Probably 2-3 years before I started to get a foothold in the community. And I had people come through, and I couldn't find investigations because the word wasn't out there. And I went on talk radios like the college. We had talk radio in Bellingham. I'd go on there, especially around Halloween. They wanted to have me come in, but the rest of the year, not so much. Anywhere that I could get a write up, I'd put up posters at the community bulletin boards. I really beat really just went all out trying to get the word out there about me and this group. And of course, I had my internet up. I had my webpage up, I should say. Had the information on how they could contact me and get stuff. And it was slow in coming. I had people come through that weren't interested to stay for the long haul. I guess they wanted an investigation or two and then move on. They just didn't have the zealous work that I did. And so I finally met a woman who did help me do the footwork, and her name was Kat.
Yeah,
And
Kat.
she became my co-founder with me because she stuck with me, and she worked with me, and she and I put our heads together, and we got that group up and running. As well, you joined us. You found out about us, and by the time you came along, we might have had 4, 5, 6 regular people that went on an investigation. You were one of them.
So just to make this kind of personal. So when I showed up at the first Boo meeting, what was there about me that kind of made you say, "Hey, this guy was..."
First, it was your email. It was your email,
Oh,
okay?
okay.
He emails me saying something about, would you be interested in meeting up with a like-minded person?
Uh,
And I'm looking now. Me and Kat are both on this computer, my laptop, looking at my emails, going through them, because we had our email like NW Boo. So we're looking at the Boo email, and we're both at the screen looking at this, and we just kind of turned and looked at each other and smiled like, what? Who is this weirdo? Well, it's this granola guy that wears this beanie cap all the time contacting us. and I at first I thought, is this going to be one of the strange ones? Because we had our share already. And for people to be interested in this kind of thing, we're kind of different anyway, so it attracts very different kind of people. And your email was one of those emails that I thought, oh, this one's going to be a doozy. So anyway, I emailed back to you saying, yeah, meet us at this meeting, blah blah blah, and you showed up.
I did. It sounds
You
like
were
I
kind
was
of soft spoken and kind of very proper and not as out there as I was, but hey, we clicked, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. We did. So I
Yeah.
should consider myself lucky to have gotten in the front door there.
Yeah. Well, really, all you had to do is email me, Dan. That's all. That
Yeah,
worked.
okay. Well, that was one of the best things I've ever done. So I appreciate the fact you let me be a part of
And
it.
you and I've been friends ever since.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so one of the things you made mention of that we should maybe differentiate between. So and this came out in the class that we did too. So there are a ghost hunting team is really a composite of two kinds of skills. One, you've got mediums and psychics, which you were one of those.
Yeah.
Then the other part of that were the people that I would refer to as the techies. So talk about that. What kind of people were you looking for that were techies?
Up in Bellingham, we had a hard time finding techies. I don't know why, but it's mostly psychics, mediums were attracted to what we did. And so most of our group were mediums and are very intuitive people, psychics. And we had a few channelers come along and join our group that were phenomenal. I learned from them. I mean, I thought I was good. I mean, they showed me things I didn't even, that they taught me how to relax and become even more trusting of the process. And these are people very needed. We needed them, and I had a hard time finding the technical people. It's very important to go over the evidence, all that recordings and all the videos, the digital recorders and all that is very time consuming, can be very boring. And you need people who just kind of thrive doing that kind of stuff because they just want to know. And so I needed more people like that. And that was kind of my downfall, was that we didn't have enough technical people there. So I was constantly putting the word out there, but again, it was mostly psychics that were coming in to the meetings and wanting to be a part of the group.
Yeah, Sherry, when you say technical people, what are you talking about? People, so some people think that really ghost investigation is a kind of a combination of the intuitive, which would be the psychics and the mediums, and then the more scientific.
Mhm.
So what kind of doodads and gizmos and gadgets were you looking for?
Goodness.
Scientific
We needed technical people that could deal with the website, for one thing, to get our presence out there and keep it there. We needed that. That was very badly needed. And I was the one doing it in Cat. And, I'm no technical person, but I did the best I could. I'd have people come and go for short periods of time, say, oh yeah, I'll help you out the website. But then they were gone. Then, we were buying equipment, and, we don't charge for investigations. We don't have money coming in. That's out of our pocket. And that's the way it is for most teams. And you can't make a living at this. You do this because this is our calling. And this is something that we want to do. And people say, what's your hobby? Well, maybe you can call it a hobby. To me, it was just a way of life. It was almost like a religion. Like I said, I belong to a spiritualist church. So it was part of my spirit to do that. And so we needed things like recorders, the digital recorders. We needed things like video cameras.
Why did you want to why did you need recorders? What would you, I guess what I'm trying to get at is what did you do with all the technical stuff that you
Are you
learned?
wanting to talk about the equipment and
Yeah,
what their functions were?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, the digital recorders were something that we would use to get voice phenomena, and that was one of the strengths of my group. Almost everybody that came in there were really good at getting EVPs, and we had
And
some phenomenal ones.
what is that for people that don't know what that
That's
is?
that's electronic voice phenomena. So it's voices that you don't hear during the setting of the investigation, but when you play back your recorder, all of a sudden there's a spirit talking to you. Now we didn't hear it, I didn't hear it, but it's there, and I know you've gotten them yourself, so you know what I'm talking about. Um, there are times when we do hear spirits call out to us with our ears, and that's called a voice phenomena. That's just VP. And a lot of times when you hear it with the ear, it doesn't come out on the recorder.
Hmm.
Now, I've had classes through Lloyd Arbuck when he was in Issaquah, Washington, a few times. And he talked about that the spirits will pick who they want to communicate with. So you can have a whole group of people, but maybe only one person is going to get that EVP from a spirit in the room. Or one person is going to get that vision of a spirit when somebody sitting right next to them can't see it. The spirit is going to connect with our energy, sort of like we meld our essence together, and they're going to like show up on our film, or they're going to show up. Their voice is going to come across on our recorder, or we're going to see them visually.
So what?
So I found that to be true. I didn't quite understand that when Lloyd was first talking about that, but then after that I started noticing he was right. That's the way it does work.
So one of the things you hear when you do ghost hunting is a piece of equipment is an EMF meter. What's that? And why would that be
Electronic
something?
EMF meter. Oh God, electronic
Magnetic.
EMF. Yes, magnetic. Thank you. It's been so long since I've been
Yeah.
out on investigation that
So
I've even forgotten what that was.
why would you want to have that?
K2s. I like the K2s a lot. I use them a lot. That was my favorite. And they've got some new meters now, and also recorders, voice recorders that are just phenomenal. That I've been, because I belong to a few of the Facebook paranormal groups pages, and they got some new technology out there. It's really good. But I don't really understand the EMF meters because I know psychically a spirit is close by. I'm getting that spirit, I'm getting its essence and all that, but the meters aren't showing it. Then other times, the meters are showing it, and I don't know why that is. And of course, we have to go around as we're setting up our meters and see where the hot spots are, like where's the electrical outlets that could send this meter off, where are utility boxes where the power comes in that might set this meter off, anything that might set it off, like a computer or anything like that. We have to know where those spots are before we get serious about, okay, let's collect the data now. And so we put the meter in a place where we're not going to have the natural readings come across on it.
Mhm.
So, like, let's say we set up a meter that has sound to it. We're going to set it up in a location where there is no electrical forces that are going to interfere with that. And then you wait. It's a waiting game.
So
and when you have a hand,
I guess the idea is if you want to prove the existence of a spirit, you kind of have a combination approach. Use somebody who's a medium and a psychic, but then you also use some of these gadgets, EVPs, EMF meters, digital cameras to see if you can back up what the psychic's seeing. That'd be fair to say?
right. Exactly. There's very seldom have and I did that for, as far as having recorders and voice recorders and that stuff, I did that for 13 years before I retired. And there was, like, that I can think of off the top of my head, only one time that a recorder validated what I psychically was telling the group. They couldn't hear me. I mean, they couldn't hear what was said on the recorder because they couldn't hear the spirit talking. I had the spirit talk through me. They could hear me, and the spirit was introducing himself as Charlie Gibson. Charlie Gibson, he was saying. He was in a bar, and he was like a jolly good fella. You know, he was probably a little bit, feels like he's liberated or liberated, and you know, he's a drunk, and he's saying, "I'm Charlie Gibson," and he's got this big bellowing laugh and so on. And then as they listen back to the recordings after we're done with the investigation, you hear his voice. It says, "I'm Charlie Gibson." So that validated, you know, the psychic being myself and the EVP that the spirit left on the recorder of somebody other than me. Actually, we validated each other. So that's one of the very rare occasions that happens.
So Dave, do you want to jump in here again?
Well, I'm curious about the EMF, the electromagnetic frequency. I believe is it's measuring frequencies or magnetic fields. And my understanding of physics is rather minimal, but I understand that magnetic fields are generated by the movement of electrical charge, electrical forces. So it's reasonable to say that if you get a magnetic field generated that wasn't there before, at least not indicated by the meter, it suggests that there is an electric field moving, or an electric current, I should say. And so the question is, why do we believe that a ghost would generate an electric current, or would somehow affect the magnetic fields, the natural fields? And why would that, and I don't know the answer to this, of course, but what are we trying to show there with the magnetic field? Is that just the presence of a movement in some space? I mean, is that what, or is it a hot and cold thing? I mean, what really is the idea behind bringing in the EMF as opposed to all the different neat gadgets, as Dan keeps saying, that humans have invented to measure stuff? I mean, why would it be the EMF specifically? Is there a reason for that you know of?
I'm with you. It doesn't make sense to me either. Like I say, I'm not a technical person, but I do know that on occasions we have been sitting with like handheld meters, like K2 meters, and in an area where there is no electrical interference in that area where we're sitting with that meter, then all of a sudden that meter starts going off, or the gauge starts flipping back and forth, or the lights start moving from green to red, or yellow to red. And so, I know the electrical current coming out of that plug-in over there on that wall across the room isn't jumping over there all of a sudden. That's not happening. So what that energy is that all of a sudden comes close enough to that meter to set it off, I can't explain it. Like I say, there's more questions now since I've become an investigator before I started doing this. And I'm with you. I don't understand it, but I do know that there's some truth to it.
Well, the point here that I think needs to be made is that skeptics will use something like that and say, well, you don't really know what, you don't have a theory that says that ghosts generate an electric current, so no matter what you get on your EMF, it doesn't really prove anything. Well, yeah, you can argue that if you don't have a model to begin with, you can disprove anything. I mean, but the point is that we don't have a model yet. That doesn't discount the observation. So if you accumulate enough observations of these weird hot and cold fields, these, rather relatively large magnetic field disturbances where there's no obvious or even plausible explanation, to me, that is valid evidence that needs to be documented, regardless of whether we have a model for why a ghost would do that in the first place. I mean, you're detecting something that's an anomaly. And that's the beginning of scientific inquiry, not the end. You get an anomaly, you start looking for the model, you start trying to explain it. So that's why I think like Boo are very valuable, even though you don't have giant scientific backing and you don't have fully formed models of things, like the big universities might, or whatever, scientists in different areas, they have all that stuff because they spent $1 billion investigating the particular thing in question. But I think that's the thing that the paranormal groups are constantly up against, and it opens the door for skeptics to poo-poo everything, but it also discourages a lot of us from pursuing it because we still, to this point, haven't come up with a very good model that's predictive and everything. But I would say, in conclusion, if it's interesting to us, and if we're generating some real data that can be written down and reported to someone else, then I say, hey, let's keep doing it, because eventually something's going to fall out of the data and it's going to go, hallelujah, that explains something at least. But like you said,
Yeah.
the pattern really is, the more we look at some of this stuff, the more confusing it gets, which tells me that
Yeah.
there's something very complex underlying it that the human mind just hasn't grasped yet. But that's no reason to stop looking at it, of course. Especially when people like us find it
Right.
very interesting and engaging. And like you said, you devoted 13 years to something that, I don't know if you could say that you've come to any conclusions or that you've even explained any question that you set out to explain, but I'm guessing that you
Right.
wouldn't regret the time you spent either.
No, I don't. Not at all. And like I say, for me, I became more open-minded to the possibilities of what could be. And whereas I was kind of black and white thinking I was in the gray areas.
Right.
And I found out that no, I wasn't as gray as I thought I was. And but a lot grayer now. Let's go. I'm going to switch over to Sasquatch, for instance.
Yeah.
There's so many videos on the internet now about Sasquatch, and because of my own experience out in the field and field research, Dan's been a part of that with me. And actually, Dan was the one that kind of encouraged me to get out and start looking for Sasquatch up in the Bellingham area. And I've had my own experiences with it, but all these videos now on the internet and everything else, I don't believe most of it because it's just too much information, too easy of a way to fake it. And not that I'm a technical person and know how to that, but there's just too much of that. So, like you were just saying, you just made a point about, to the skeptics. Well, I guess I'm a skeptic. I don't really believe those videos that I'm seeing, and I really do want to believe a lot of those videos because a lot of them are very, very good and they're very, very convincing if you don't know anything different. But it's just really hard for me to accept them. And there has been a couple of them that I have kind of leaned towards, like, okay, that's believable for me. But and same with the UFOs. Lately, the UFO stuff that we're seeing on TV and their the footage, let's say in the last 15 years and everything, is very good. And before that, I thought that a lot of that was hoax, but now it's getting better and better and better, and I'm starting to believe more and more and more. And we talked about this before we came on the air, and it's all very exciting.
Yeah, and I think you bring up so many interesting points and topics there, and that I agree with you that I tend to not believe anything I see anymore. After somewhere around 1990 or maybe the mid 90s, it's become so easy to fake things, to hoax things, and if you're basing your opinion or your theory or whatever on a lot of visual observation, a lot of things that are acquired by technology, I think that you're missing half the picture, at least half the picture. And when people say, well, you've got a whole bunch of people saying things about UFOs and witnesses to Bigfoot and blah, 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 but where's the evidence? You know, where's the proof? Well, I think we're beyond the point where you can provide proof because everything can be faked now. So
Yeah.
again, talking about skeptics, and I am one too. I look at everything with a skeptical eye, but I'm not someone who's going to deny. I'm not a denier of evidence. You know, when something shows up that has been tested and replicated and you know, analyzed by experts, all, and it's still a mystery, well, I'm ready to look at that and consider that it's really showing something very interesting. Whereas the denier will just say, well, you know, it's probably mundane, so I can safely, you know, ignore it. That's what a denier will do. But a lot of them will say, you know, all you have is witness testimony. And I always say in response that look at the legal system. The legal system is almost 100% based on testimony of witnesses. That's why you get reliable witnesses, you get credible witnesses. And when you're talking about UFOs or Bigfoot, we've got so many thousands of credible reports, credible witnesses. If these cases were taken into a court of law in this country, at least, they would be proven beyond a reasonable doubt by a judge who's objective, because they're, you know, most people don't have reason to lie, to make things up. They don't go through elaborate hoaxes for no reason, you know. And I think maybe this, ironically, this giant uptick in technological advancement may send us back the other way to really start paying more attention and relying on witness testimony instead. Because like you said, any video these days can be a fake. You know, a judge will probably throw out most of the videos now, to be honest, talking about some of these subjects like a UFO or whatever. And we may have to go back to actually listening to humans and judging whether they're credible and whether they had a lot to lose by reporting a certain thing. And that's how it used to be before all this technology. So it's kind of, it's an interesting turn of events, I think, here. We all want the big smoking gun video of the UFO landing, and we want Bigfoot to walk up to the camera and wave in it and do a TikTok video or something for the world. But
and I think there's some out there like that too, isn't there?
yeah, that
people in the monkey suits.
Oh, I'm sure there are some creative people, but again, we're kind of stuck with having to believe people when they are credible, and I think that's fine. So again, that speaks to what you're talking about here, what we started the interview with, and that's the ghost hunters involving sensitives and empaths and psychics and all these terms we use to describe you and you know, your colleagues who can go a little bit beyond the normal senses that people like Dan and I have, because we appear to have no psychic sense whatever. I know that
there's a need for you guys in these kind of groups.
Yeah. So we have to be the
Dave, is that, were you going to say we have no psychic sense, or we just have no sense?
We have no, sometimes that's true. But again, it's a mix. We need to keep that mix of technology, but also the human element. And I think the human element has become even more important now than it was before. And so I appreciate what you're doing, Sherry, and it's just good to know that people are putting in literally decades of this kind of work, because in the end, I truly believe that the truth will fall out of it at some point. We'll be like, oh, there it is. Now I get it. I don't think we're there yet, though.
One thing I
agree with you.
One thing I want Sherry to address, and I was kind of privy to some of it, is when you recruit people to be in your ghost hunting group, you don't always get the most reliable people, or you get some people who might have agendas, other than
Yeah.
your agenda? Without using any names, Sherry, do you have any examples of that?
Well, yeah, like I say, the kind of group attracts unusual people, and some more unusual than others. And luckily, you were one of the good unusual people. But we've had some people who I've had to ask to leave the group, or take a time out, take a sabbatical, so to speak.
Hmm.
And then when it came time, one of them came back and asked to come back to the group, and I suggested that maybe this wasn't fit for him. We had a gentleman that came in, and he said he was a deputy sheriff. Now, I'm a divorced woman, and my ex-husband was a policeman, and so I was a cop's wife for a number of years, and I kind of know their lifestyle. I know about um, sort of like how they think. I kind of get that, and so I was welcoming to this guy. I figured for one thing he'd be honest, right? Well, well, this guy he started doing the strangest things. Like several times he had spirits attacking, or so he said, and he would double over like he'd been hit in the gut, and he'd bend over and he'd and that sort of stuff. In investigations in beings I had investigated before, and I knew there was no violent or aggressive spirits in the place. There was no poltergeist activity of any kind there, anything that would bring this on. So I started questioning that. He started romancing some of the women within the group, and he was a married man. And but hey, they were adults. The women were okay with that, and as long as they didn't bring any kind of drama to the investigation the night that we would show up. So I'm an open-minded person. I lived in Washington State. I'm open-minded. I'm kicked back, and so it just got weirder and weirder. Well, one of his girlfriends, who was a member of our group, she calls me up one night and tells me that he's wanting to commit suicide. Now, I know that a lot of cops can get depressed and all that. I lived in a circle of law enforcement people, and I thought, this guy might eat his gun.
Hmm.
So I called the police to do a wellness check on him. And I knew where he lived because I'd gone by and picked him up before his house. So I told him the information. I couldn't remember his name, Dan, if you asked me to, but we're not using names there. But I knew that his name, and I gave his name to them. And so the local PDs, checked on their computers. I'm talking to them. So they said that they'd go by the house and they'd check in on him. Well, they also informed me that they didn't have an officer, a deputy officer by that name. And I thought, well, okay, well, maybe he's a policeman and not a sheriff. But anyway, they were trying to find him, and so I was telling them, giving them like this police, this what do you call it when you call in to the police department? What are they called now? I don't even think what they call them. Anyway, I was giving him this information about this guy and telling him about how I was a divorcee, and how my ex was a cop, and I understood this and that, and about depression, and how the job can cause that, and blah blah blah, yada yada yada. And I was there. I felt foolish later, but come to find out, the guy wasn't even in law enforcement. He told us he was, and he told us that his wife was a nurse. She wasn't. Come find out later on. So he with this doubling over because ghosts were hitting him and giving him belly punches and stuff. I told him that you need to back away from this, because for some reason you're attracting spirits that are harmful to you, and I can't have that. Your safety is most important. So I had to ask him to take a sabbatical for a while, and I gave him a 6 month time limit on that. And after that time, he actually came back to me wanting to come back to the group. But by that time, I had figured out and checked into it through my sources after the phone call with the police department that he was not law enforcement. I forget what he was into, but it was the furthest thing from law enforcement. He had actually, on one investigation, we were at at a building where there was a nightclub inside, and there were some people outside in the smoking area that was kind of getting loud. So he walked out there posing as a deputy sheriff, telling them that they needed to keep it down and stuff like that. So he was posturing this for us, for our viewing, I'm sure. And I was gullible and I was taking it all in. I mean, I believed you. I took him at his word. So you just never know what you got coming into these meetings. Say, hey, I'm interested. Can I be a part of this group? And I've had a lot of people that have they like to get into the Facebook part of their group, and then they start getting aggressive and name calling to other people and just not nice. That sort of stuff just goes on. There was this one guy. Now this guy was really, really nice, and I just loved having him. But he was very different. There was a guy that came in dressed like a vampire.
I remember you told
I
me
was at
about
one of
this
these
guy.
community, yeah, I was at this community fair, this festival. There's like a winter, fall festival in Bellingham, and I had my presentation board up. I had my table out, my flyers, all that stuff out, and my cards and all that stuff, talking to the public, blah blah blah. I seen this man walk in the door of this big hall, and I was back on the wall opposite that door. So I had an opportunity to watch him as he walked around the room. Now he had an entourage with him. He was a very good man. He had on his cape. He had in his fangs. I found out when he approached my table. And he's going around looking at all the vendors, and he's got his girlfriend on his arm, and he's got the couple men with girlfriends on their arms, and there's more girls than there are guys. And it was quite a sight to behold. I mean, you could not stare at these people. And I'm watching them make the rounds through the hall until they start seeing my thing. And I had always like black goth type stuff, because I mean we're dealing with the paranormal, right? So I'm kind of like hosty and all that stuff, and they just like hit my table like, whoa, oh, look at this. And so they were so excited. They must have been around about an hour talking to me, and other people would come join in on the conversation, and they'd kind of move along, but that would just kind of stand with me for about an hour. And they joined the group and were delightful, and they were very good at investigations. They were very exciting. Now, this gentleman moved away after a couple of years, but he stayed with me for quite a while, and he just left us maybe a little bit before Dan came on with me. But he was very goth and just so much fun. He's strange. Yes, I'm strange, but he was his own kind of strange. It was fun having him around.
So needless to say, ghost hunting groups attract interesting people. So I want to be
Yeah.
cognizant of our time here. Sherry might want to go to bed at some point in time back there in Florida. So maybe we could end this up, unless Dave has some other things, with you talking about some of your.
Well, did we want to talk more about UFOs? Dave wanted to bring some stuff.
Well, I'm just cognizant of the time that we've got.
Okay.
Maybe we can just wrap it up on some very current news. And today is February 10th of 2023, in case people are listening to this at a much later time. Maybe this will turn into something, or maybe it won't, but all over the news that we see today is that the U.S. shoots down high altitude object over Alaska. And I've read quite a bit through all the reporting, and nobody has said what this thing was. They've just said it's not a balloon. And this, of course, follows the ongoing international incident here with China's surveillance balloon being shot down by President Biden. But now they're talking about another object that not just that we were concerned about, but that the U.S. scrambled fighter jets to shoot down. I don't know if that's a common thing in the U.S. military or anywhere else, but usually you don't scramble jets to shoot down a benign thing. I mean, it's a threat, and I think the reporting was said that it potentially posed a threat to the U.S. population. So this is over Alaska too. So it's interesting to me. I don't know how this fits into our conversation exactly, but I think all these anomalies are ultimately connected somewhere. And if this object was something that's unidentified, that is a very interesting news story, and it is plastered all over the news. So whatever it turns out to be, if they even tell us what it was, or if they tell us nothing to see here, it was just a blah, blah, blah. I mean, maybe it is a blah, 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 but right now they're not telling us what the thing is. So, just maybe I'm appealing to Sherry's psychic abilities here. Maybe she can tell us what she thinks is really going on in the news today.
Oh gosh, I would have meditated before our thing if I'd known was going to come up on this.
No, we're not
I
expecting an
don't know, but
explanation.
I'm excited. I was telling Dave before we came on the air that I don't watch the news. I'm one of these people that don't like to be stressed out. I'm more of a
Yeah.
I, I'm kind of like I got one of these blue personalities. I'm a tree hugger, and I've sat at the base of cedar trees for years just to ground, that sort of thing. I'm that kind of person.
The news is
And
the exact wrong thing to watch if you want to connect with nature and the spirit world. I think
yeah,
absolutely right in that
yeah.
case.
And the more that I wanted to connect, the more I connected with the earth, and I watched the news less and less. But we were talking about this before we got on the air, and it's like, God, I hope there is something paranormal about it. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're telling me about them sending out jets to this thing up in the sky, kind of, in the past, there has been reports about how UFOs, extraterrestrials, have been responsible for them getting around silos with the
Right.
our missiles and stuff, and taking control over that and everything else. I can't imagine a UFO being able to be shot down, really. But then again, maybe our technology is a lot better than I think it is. Our airplanes and our firepower and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Maybe theirs isn't as strong as I think it should be, or it can be.
Or maybe they're
So
just
I don't know.
everything.
Go ahead.
Well, I just said maybe one of the 18 intelligence agencies that we have in this country, maybe they're just lying about everything, or they're trying to construct a narrative. They're always trying to construct or maintain some narrative,
Yeah.
especially around UFOs and ET and, well, everything. So I think this relates to what we were talking about before, in that there's always a political agenda, and I don't mean Democrat or Republican. I mean political, as in, a big brother type of attitude from these intelligence.
Right. What are we going to tell people?
They're trying to craft a narrative to control the situation as best as they can, and this goes all the way back to when UFOs first became a thing, and back to Dan and I have talked so many times about the Brookings report. In 1960, I believe it was, that was actually reported to Congress, and some 200 plus scientists were involved in this thing, research saying, what happens if the average Joe public is exposed to, or even scientists, what happens to them when they're exposed to strong evidence of super intelligence, I think was the phrase they used. So in other words, ET coming to flex their their muscles, their cosmic muscles in our face. How are we going to react to that? And the answer was that it would not be good, and in fact it may end up in what was the phrase, Dan, the disintegration of society or something like that. And what I always find interesting about that report is that it concluded that it would be the scientists who would be most devastated by this discovery. It wasn't the church going people. It wasn't the average Joe. It wasn't, the plumbers or the whatever the store owners, the farmers, it wasn't any of them, it was the scientists. And they said because scientists are most interested in achieving mastery over nature or something like that. It's been a while since I've read the report.
Mhm.
So scientists'
Mhm.
world would be rocked by discovery of something that was smarter than them, something that was higher on the cosmic food chain. They wouldn't like that. That would be very disturbing and very disruptive to their worldview and their careers, frankly. So when I see a story
Yeah.
like the news, maybe ghosts aren't as disruptive because most scientists, they just say, yeah, it could be something and poo-poo it because it's not in their face threatening necessarily. But when you've got this sort of story in the news saying, yeah, by the way, there's an intelligent craft that's hovering above you right now. We don't know if it has weapons on board or if it can, dematerialize and show up in a different coordinate or whatever.
Mhm.
Going to shoot nukes down on, that's much more of a threat. And I think that's why we've seen an
Well,
up
when you
that lately is the threat. And I'm worried about the narrative. That's what I'm saying here, Sherry. What do you think about that?
yeah. Well, when you were talking earlier about this, I was thinking, before I was answering about, they taken over the missile silos and proven to the people down there that, they can take control of that and control that narrative, as you would put it.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, maybe our government, maybe governments within the world governments have shot these UFOs down, and we just don't know about it because they cover up so much. And so maybe this is one of these earlier or the later on things that maybe they're just not working real hard to cover up right now. Maybe something more will come of this.
Yeah,
Here I'm thinking that these UFOs have been really powerful and not allowing themselves to get shot down. Well, maybe they have been shot down, and I just know it.
it could be. And however, I think that probably that has been they bring out the full cover up team to make sure it doesn't make it into the news. Right now, if you go over to CNN.com, it's the headline news that it's been there for 2 days. Fighter jets shoot down an object, and nobody thought to ask, well, what the hell was this object, by the way? US government. And there have been no answers. So it's just tiptoeing around the big obvious thing. Was this a friggin' UFO or not? That's what most of us would say when
Right.
we read that headline. And the fact that they're
Right.
not going to great lengths to deny that is what's very interesting and what's very different from how it's been in the past. So maybe we're approaching a different era in terms of how it's treated in the media. But in the end, I totally agree with what you're saying, Sherry, about not paying attention to the media because a lot of it is constructed narratives. It's stories that are designed to make us think a certain thing and believe a certain thing. And I'd rather trust her
Mm-hmm.
and myself and my connection with the spirit world, so to speak,
Right.
than I will
Right.
trust a news story. So it's just interesting. I don't
Yeah.
expect an answer, but I kind of
Well,
like.
depending on what comes out of this in the next few weeks, your show might very well be good to focus on the UFO, the topic of UFOs and this particular instance. If it sounds like it might be something that was unidentified, might be an interesting topic.
Yeah, if it persists, we'll certainly, try to get some guests and delve into it a little bit more.
Yeah.
But it'll probably fade away. It's my guess, with many unanswered questions, like most of these things.
Yeah. Well, Roswell didn't fade away, even as hard as they tried, right?
True, it's been going for what, 60, no, 70 years.
70 years, 70 some years,
It's kind of
something
depressing
like
to think
that.
about it. It's going that long. We still
Yeah.
don't really have a very good answer, but
Yeah. Yeah.
oh well.
Well, I'm a believer. I'm a believer in all of. I mean, I believe in the UFOs. I believe in aliens. I believe in Sasquatch, and I believe in the spirit world. And there's so much more that I haven't even really focused on to think about, to say, you know, what's my opinion on that? There's so much more out there. But these three things, I am a believer.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of evidence. There's a lot of reason to believe that there's something very significant going on. It's just hard to pin it down, of course. But, you know, we try with our conversations here, and I definitely appreciate Dan asking you, his friend, to come on and talk about weird stuff and be open-minded. That's we need more
Yeah.
open-mindedness for sure, but with the skeptical eye, which you clearly have also.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, it was really nice coming on here, gents. Thanks for asking me. It's nice to have a conversation and all.
You're always welcome to come back, Sherry, and you've been a
Well, thank you.
repeat guest of ours, so we always appreciate the repeat guests. So take care
Yeah.
of yourself there in Florida, and
I
Dave
will.
Dave will let you know when we have this edited, and you can put it wherever you want to put it. If you
Okay.
Put it on YouTube
Okay.
yeah,
and
YouTube.
let everyone know.
Dave's gonna put it on YouTube. So good
Yeah.
night.
Okay, great.
Good night from
Good
Olympia,
night, y'all.
Washington.
Okay, good night, Sherry. Thank you. Good night, Dan.
Bye, Sherry.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.